Abortion pills are more widely available now than ever before, and that's made mifepristone an urgent priority for anti-abortion groups. The Christian legal advocates who helped overturn Roe v. Wade filed a suit in Texas in November 2022 to ban the medication outright. An appeals court didn't go that far, but it did order the FDA to reinstate nationwide a number of restrictions, including the requirement that doctors can only prescribe pills in person. Now, that case has reached the Supreme Court.
So a group of anti-abortion doctors have filed suit in Amarillo, Texas, challenging the FDA approval of the abortion drug mifepristone. Unfortunately, these crusaders couldn't muster a convincing enough argument. So at least for now, the drug is still available to people. So what was their argument? It was all based on a really strange hypothetical situation, and I will lay it out for you right now. They argued that this drug is so dangerous that some pregnant woman somewhere would inevitably experience some kind of serious complications from taking it. Then she would go to an emergency room where a doctor, maybe an anti-abortion doctor, would be working. So that doctor would then have to leave his other patients to go tend to this woman who took a drug that she never should have been able to take in the first place, lest something like this happen. And then what? That anti-abortion doctor would somehow now have to aid in an abortion and become emotionally traumatized from the experience. That's really what their argument was. And that was such a far-fetched scheme that even the Supreme Court justices, even the anti-abortion ones, didn't buy it. So for one, mifepristone is hardly the most dangerous drug out there, so their whole hypothetical makes no sense. It's a progesterone blocker that aids in the abortion process, but after over 600 clinical trials, it's presented with less than a 1% risk of serious complications. So here is Dr. Linda Prine discussing just how safe this drug actually is.
What are your observations as a longtime provider about the safety and the efficacy of mifepristone?
It's very effective. I don't even have medications that are 98 to 99% effective. Our blood pressure medicines aren't effective like that. So it's an unusually effective medication, if anything, and extremely safe.
Yeah, it's so safe that it's a little ridiculous that they even try to use the safety in their argument at all. We'll get to some of those arguments in a bit, but first, John, what do you think about their weirdo hypothetical argument that they decided to take all the way to the Supreme Court?
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
I don't know if it's weird. I think it's actually kind of fun. It's sort of like it sets up kind of a creative challenge for us if we want to get something else banned. So if there's some sort of medication that you don't like, you could say, okay, a doctor could theoretically be operating on someone, and then someone else drinks a bunch of rum. They get drunk, they then get in a car accident, they go to the emergency room, and then the doctor has to leave their good non-rum drinking patient and go deal with that rummy. I don't know. Like, this is not how law is supposed to work. And I guess the silver lining is that maybe it still isn't how it works. I like that, on the one hand, the Supreme Court, they killed Roe v. Wade. They've been perfectly willing to set fire to precedent, even decades and decades of precedent. But this at least demonstrates that maybe they kind of still want like a fig leaf, that things are working the way they're supposed to, so that's good. And on the side of the anti-abortion forces, we know that in the wake of the death of Roe v. Wade, that proved to be politically very difficult for Republicans. And the elections since then, particularly special elections, have not gone especially well. It's expected that that's gonna have a big influence on the presidential election this year. So like you would think that they would like take their victory and just chill for a couple of years, maybe let the furor die down. But they don't. They seem to want to activate like challenge mode for this presidential race and just make sure that it's front of mind for everyone with medication abortion and challenges to IVF and all sorts of things like that. So it's a weird political strategy at the very least.
Yeah, you kind of have to wonder if these doctors, if like the politicians in Washington are like, can you guys just chill for a minute, But we will get to some of those weird hypotheticals that you mentioned. But Helen, what do you have to say?
I love this maybe concept. I have said this many times before publicly. The #1 item on my bucket list is to have a threesome with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Now, maybe you know, or maybe you don't know, that they had a very nasty divorce a few years ago. But maybe they're at some kind of party together, and maybe I also would be at the same party, and maybe all three of us would get totally tanked, and maybe they would want to get into a hate doing it situation, and maybe they wouldn't have nowhere else to do it except for in my hotel room, and maybe all of our clothes would kind of fall off and we would all fall into bed together. Maybe, I mean, it's unlikely, but maybe the possibility is there. So let's make a law about it. Am I right?
Well, I really want that for you.
Thank you. I've been saying it, like I've been declaring this to the universe. Like I thought my manifestation is off because I've been declaring this to the universe for literally decades. Please let me have a threesome with Brad Pitt and Angelina.
You gotta believe harder. You have to believe harder, and I'll help. I'll believe with you. So you know we'll both be working on it.
Thank you.
Okay, so here are the arguments that were presented. So according to The Intercept, U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar told the court this. FDA approved mifepristone based on the agency's scientific judgment that the drug is safe and effective. It's maintained that judgment across 5 presidential administrations, and millions of Americans have used mifepristone to safely end their pregnancies. So the challenge to the drug was first brought up by the Alliance of Hippocratic Medicine, which is comprised of a few different groups of anti-abortion doctors. They filed the suit in Amarillo, Texas specifically because they knew that if they did it there, that the case would be heard by a very far-right, anti-abortion, Trump-appointed judge. And yes, sure enough, his name was Matthew Kacsmaryk. I think that's how you say it. Of course, he sided with the alliance, but to justify his ruling, he cited some very questionable and biased sources, including 2 studies that were sponsored by anti-abortion groups and were later retracted. According to the Associated Press, Kacsmaryk cited one of the retracted studies in claiming that mifepristone causes many intense side effects. The ruling also cited the second retracted paper in explaining why anti-abortion physicians had the legal standing to bring their lawsuit. Instead of showing they were directly harmed by a product, the judge said medical abortions cause, quote, enormous pressure and stress to physicians. So interestingly, no mention of the pressure or stress on the patient there. They're just worried about the physician. So ultimately, there are concerns over setting an unrealistic legal precedent if the Supreme Court would have agreed to ban the drug based on the arguments presented. And John, I think that's what you were referring to earlier. It could mean, for example, that anyone could sue to have a medication banned just because they have some kind of personal belief against it and they don't want anyone else to have it for that reason. So Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she did suggest that if a doctor has a problem with abortion, that doctor can exempt themselves from participating. That doesn't mean that the whole drug has to be made unavailable to everyone everywhere. So John and Helen, I want to get your thoughts, but one last thing to consider before I get those is the Comstock Act of 1873, right? Which is a law that isn't really enforced right now. It's called a zombie law, but anti-abortion activists are hoping that it'll be their way of getting abortion outlawed unofficially. So the Comstock Act of 1873 made it illegal to send obscene, lewd, or lascivious, immoral, or indecent publications through the mail. The law also made it a misdemeanor for anyone to sell, give away, or possess an obscene book, pamphlet, picture, drawing, or advertisement. The breadth of the legislation included writings or instruments pertaining to contraception and abortion, even if written by a physician. So the concern here is that in reviving this zombie law, other gynecological medications and instruments could become unavailable to doctors and patients across the country, even if they have nothing to do with abortions. So the ruling for all of this is expected to come later this year, possibly in June. John, what do you think? How does this make you feel? Hopeful, terrified, both?
I mean, look, what we seem to have gotten from the Supreme Court outside of Alito or Clarence Thomas, that gives me some hope, I suppose. Not necessarily that we're in the clear when it comes to topics of reproductive freedom with this Supreme Court, but at least in this particular topic, maybe this is a bridge too far, so that's good. When it comes to the Comstock Act, okay, just don't put any words in what you ship when you ship the medication abortion, and that should get you around that, I guess. I think it's ironic that the right wants to take us back to 1873 law. That seems up their alley. or maybe a couple decades earlier actually, because they didn't like some of the legal changes that preceded the 1870s. But anyway, yeah, look, every one of these arguments is ridiculous. That the physicians are worried about emotional pressure and strain. Oh, it's uncomfortable that you might have to live in a world in which someone else has a medication abortion. You know what causes emotional pressure and strain? I'm a new dad, having a kid. Being forced to have a kid, I imagine, would put some emotional pressure and strain on people. And if it's just the fact that someone else takes a medication can have secondary emotional characteristics on you, and we're being told that by the facts don't care about your feelings movement, by the way. Okay, well, Ozempic's very popular now. Lots of people are getting on Ozempic. Thanks to that, according to the advertisements, they're dropping weight, which means that I have now more competition. So that makes me very uncomfortable, the fact that other people are gonna be lower weight. I guess it should be banned. Is this the sort of like legal apparatus that we want to set up in this country? I really don't think that we do. I don't even think that these people think that we should, except in the case of this particular medication. And at least in this case, Big Pharma has said that if this is allowed to be banned, then you will see these sorts of challenges coming to a wide breadth of medications. And that's not just a good argument, that's an argument being made by Big Pharma, who you better bet the US judicial system cares a whole lot more about than the rights of individual Americans. So thankfully our interests seem to have lined up in this case, so we're probably gonna be free and clear.
I mean, if this law sets a precedent, buckle up Viagra and Cialis users, because we're coming for you. I mean, I feel emotional stress thinking about a boner that lasts for 15 hours. I know.
So do I.
I know at least one. I would bet money that at least one Supreme Court justice, probably Brett Kavanaugh, let's face it, is on Viagra or Cialis. And I don't feel comfortable. It's causing me emotional stress thinking about Brett Kavanaugh with a boner at all, frankly. So look out. All other medications, including Viagra and Cialis, we're coming for you.
Or not coming. And also with Brett Kavanaugh, you can never know if he's having that boner because those robes so flowing, so loose.
Okay, I can confirm that I feel emotionally distressed right now at this conversation, at the turn that this conversation has
you
taken.
do? You're not sitting at the desk with Helen. How do you think I feel?
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.